So view form works on something called form quite a bit. So it's a safe bet that we're going to need that as a dependency. So let's see where view form is being called. It's currently being called passing a model. Let's change that so that instead of taking the entire model, it's just taking the form. And so we'll delete this and replace it with, we just accept the form as an argument. And let's see what that does for us. Okay, no problem. On to the settings. Sorry, that is a problem. Just kidding. On the next line, we immediately say session.cred model.session. So we're still referencing model inside this function, but we're only using it to get the session cred. So there's two possibilities that we could do here. One is we could say I'm going to accept, so session.cred, that function returns a maybe session, which we're immediately pattern matching on. Two possibilities. One is we could take a maybe session and say, okay, we're going to say maybe session right here, and continue as normal. That's one way we could do it. But another possibility is we could say, you know what? All we do is we render nothing if the session is nothing. Should that really be here in the form? Or could we actually narrow our type even further and say, this needs to have been handled already. It's not this function's job to deal with the possibility that there's no session. Just don't even call me if you don't have a session. I don't want to hear it. Yeah, we can do that. So we can move that to up here and say case model, session.cred model.session. And now we're handling that case out here. And we're only calling view form passing the credentials. Oops, I think I made it session. Make it cred. If we already have some cred to give it. Another possibility is that we can see that form is being used down here. If we want, we can just inline this whole thing and just say, you know what? Right here in the middle of this thing, we're going to say, if we have some cred, we're going to render a form here, and otherwise we're not going to bother doing that at all. Any of those possibilities are perfectly reasonable. What I like about this one is that there's sort of the least indirection. Everything is sort of right there where it's happening. We can see right here, if we have credentials, we will render the form. Otherwise, we will not. We can see right where that's happening in the DOM without jumping somewhere else. And then the form itself, or sorry, the view form function itself takes the least, the most narrow types that it possibly can. It says, all I want is the cred. I don't need the rest of the session. I don't need to know about the maybe. That's already been resolved for me. So when I'm scanning through, I can see sort of I can learn the most about this function at a glance.
Richard?
Yes?
Aren't you already inside a block where you know you have a value?
Entirely possible. Oh yeah, good point. Yeah, so actually that compiler error is telling me I'm shadowing this, which is a great point because at this point we already have it. So we can do significantly better than that by doing it like this. That's much better. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Questions on that?
When you were refactoring the arguments, you put the cred on the left side of the form. Is that required, or
no?
Why did you choose to put it on the left versus the right?
That's a great question. So certainly it would work fine either way. Generally speaking, when I think about argument order, I'm thinking in terms of how will partial application be affected. Typically speaking, if I'm going to partially apply a function, usually what I'm going to do is I'm going to partially apply it with some sort of piece of information that's sort of unlikely to change among multiple invocations. So if I'm calling view form, view form is kind of a silly example because I'm probably only ever going to call it one way. But let's say I were calling some other function that needed cred, I don't know, maybe I was displaying, what would I be displaying? Not favorites or follow buttons because it would also be sort of like one per. I don't know. At any rate, let's say I have 3 different buttons, all of which are slightly different, and they all require credentials. I'm much more likely to say, view button with credentials equals view button cred and partially apply that than I am the rest of the arguments, because they're more likely to change. Credentials, very unlikely to change. So whenever I have arguments that I think, no matter how many different times I call this is the least likely to ever change, I tend to want to put those up front so they're more partial application friendly. So that's settings taken care of. That's the first of our 3 to-dos. Let's take a look at home next. So once again, we have a function that's sort of taking too much. View tabs takes the model when it really doesn't need to be. And the reason I know that it doesn't need to is that immediately what we do is we say model.feedTab of, and once again we're in a situation where we have one argument, and then we also have, we're looking at cred in the session, and that's basically all we're using the model for. We certainly don't need to be using it for all that. So we can certainly take feedTab as an argument, and then instead of model.feedTab. So this is specifying which of the 3 tabs on the home screen are you potentially viewing, which is to say either your feed, global feed, or tag feed. So that's one of our arguments, but then the other one that we still need is the model.session, which we're currently only using for cred. We're using it in 2 different places. Now, unlike the previous case, here we actually do something slightly different if we don't have cred. So it's not going to work out to say this function requires cred, and we will rely on other things to take care of it ahead of time. It's actually quite important that we do get maybe cred here, because we need to do something different in the event that we in the event that we have access to cred or not, which is to say we render different tabs depending on whether you are logged out or logged in. If you're logged in, we will render your feed, but if you are logged out, we will not render your feed. So in both of these nothing branches, you don't see your feed appearing in there. Okay, so we will take maybe cred as an argument. That's a significantly narrower argument than all of this. And we'll do the same thing over here. Okay. And finally, we need to actually pass that into view tabs. I'll do that with saying view tabs and passing that as the first argument, and then model.feedTab as the other. I think that's correct. Let's see. Great. Success. Questions? Yeah.
Could you have just passed the session in and left that logic in there, or are you just kind of cleaning it up?
Oh, I'm doing it this way because this is even narrower. So the session holds on to the cred, but also other stuff, and I don't want it to have access to that if it doesn't need it. So this is sort of the narrowest possible type I could give it to where it can still do its job. The narrower, the better, as a general default. Let's move on to the last one, which is the profile page. So this one's taking the model. It also needs to take some other arguments, but let's see if we can get that model down to as little as possible. So here we're calling current username on the model. We're also, once again, getting cred off the model. And it looks like the one other place that we pass it is in feed.init, and feed.init actually does want to take model.session. So here we have a case where we can't get away with cred, because this needs more than that. We also can't even get away with maybe cred, because really what we need is we just actually need to pass a real session to feed.init. So if we look here in feed, the init function just takes a plain old session, no maybe involved, and so there's really no way of avoiding, yeah, we just got to actually have a real session in here. Having said that, we can pull our cred off of it separately, so that's fine. So session. And the one other thing that we're using the model for is we're passing it to to current username to extract the current username from it. But we can just say, you know what, just go ahead and pass that username in. Username. Okay, so now over here in the feed, we're going to pass model.session as the first argument, and model. Oh no, it was current username. That's not spelled correctly at all. There we go. Also, nope, model. Okay. And something's wrong. Okay. Wow, that's a lot of stuff that's wrong. What did I do wrong? Fetch feed, session, username. That's the session. That looks like the username. Correct feed tab, the correct page. Oh, do we have... Are we calling this in multiple places? We sure are. Okay. That explains it. All right. So let's fix it in the other places too. So this one's also going to need model.session and also current username model. And let's do that again. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay.